Hello and welcome to Inspired to Taste. I'm Liz Joy, and today I'll be creating this beautiful sparkly 3D dress cookie with an ombre effect, tons of glitter toppings, and I'll be using a combo of royal icing and fondant for this design. You can find a download link for these templates in the description below.
This design is really fun because you can kind of just play with it and do however many panels you want and kind of piece them together different ways. We're just looking for a really organic billowy effect. I went ahead and rolled my fondant thin to the pink spacers and I cut out 4 panels. Since these are a bit bigger, I went ahead and put some paper towel rolls in here just so that they can dry exactly how I want. And remember, go ahead and take a photo of this layout so that you can recreate it once they're dry. The effect on this one is actually going to be a lot of royal icing with sparkles on top, so we don't have to worry about these being perfect. We just want the shapes and the lift that we're looking for. And something to keep in mind when doing this cookie is we want to leave a lot of naked cookies showing through. We're not looking to cover this cookie. We're going to include royal icing topping, and you want to have the royal icing actually drip into the crevices. So we want to leave room for that to happen. I've seen people working on these and they'll just completely cover the skirt with folds and you're not going to get as light of an effect. So we're looking to have naked cookies showing through. For the turtleneck, I just grabbed about a pea-sized pinch of fondant and I'm just going to mold it by hand, add a touch of water, and I'm just going to shape this with a bit of a dip at the top, just kind of get it to the shape I want. And then because my panels are really soft, I'm going to set this aside as is for a few minutes until they're dry enough that I can handle them without squashing them. This cookie is going to be flooded with royal icing, and in order to do the 3D detail with the royal icing on top, we need a very specific flood, and it's a lot runnier than you probably used before. This is about a 5-second royal icing, which means that if we take some and kind of drip it, these lines will disappear in about 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it disappears. We want something that's a little bit stiff enough to stay on the 3D details, but that's going to be thin enough to run in all the crevices and cover everything. My panels are still a little bit soft, but I'm going to start attaching them. So I'm going to leave my paper towels in just because these aren't very dry yet. And I'm just going to handle these carefully. And also keep in mind we are flooding this, so it doesn't have to be super neat and tidy. We're just looking to build a structure to decorate. I also like doing height variations on the panels for this dress. It gives it more of a loose, billowy effect. Now we're going to outline this cookie with piping consistency royal icing. And please be sure and look at your downloaded guide, because we're going to go ahead and outline along the natural seams of this dress. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. We want to outline everything, including the edge of the panels when we go over. And this is so when we flood with that really loose flood frosting, it's not going to overflow. And also we're giving ourselves sections to work in because we have to work kind of quickly. And it's easiest to start with small sections and work our way up to the skirt, and this kind of delineates that for us. So I'm going to use my outline consistency that I used to attach the panels. And we're going to be pushing our flood frosting kind of over the top edge. So you don't need this to be super, super thin. We want it to be fairly tidy in case any of the lines show, but we're going to try to cover them up. But we're not worried about getting super precise, perfect lines here. And just kind of make sure your gaps are filled so that we don't deal with a lot of overflow once we're flooding. So we're going to go right to the edge of each panel, and then we're going to pipe a line at the bottom of each just to contain our flood. So again, I'm going to have you guys reference this download. What we're going to be doing is using an ombre effect with 3 colors of the 5-second flood royal icing. We're gonna start out with light tones, move to the medium, and then move to darker. And we're gonna have to work kind of quickly because we wanna sprinkle as we go. So I'm gonna start with number 1, which is the sleeve, but definitely start with the smaller spaces so you kind of get the hang of it. Before we get started flooding this, you wanna have your sprinkles ready. So we're looking for 3 colors of sprinkles for the ombre. I might end up using 4. I love bakery bling. So I used gold, white, and then their Hollywood mix, and I kind of combined them till I was happy with the shades. And I'm also going to be adding the Sugar Arts Diamond Dust, and I want this thing to sparkle and shine as much as possible, so we're gonna go all out. And then the other thing you want is a tiny spoon, like a baby spoon. It just makes it so much easier to have control over the sprinkles and where they're falling. So I like to use that instead of a shaker. And we're gonna go ahead and start flooding. So this gets a little messy. I'm gonna start on this arm with a bit of white. And you don't wanna go too crazy. We want enough flood to work with, but we don't want overflow. You can always go back and add more. And a lot of this flood won't show. The reason I do it in matching colors is in case the sprinkles aren't completely encrusting everything. I do want to have some background. So I'm just going with a scribe tool and just mixing the colors a bit so I don't have really straight lines and there's a bit more of an ombre effect. And I'm gonna take it over my kind of janky white outline. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of white and then just move up with my other colors. And now you'll see there's some overflow sprinkles in the bodice. I don't wanna mess with this area because it's still very wet, so we're gonna move on to the other arm before moving on to the bodice. And we're just gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna let that sit for a little bit so it's dry enough that I can carefully brush out the excess. So this is dried a little bit. I'm just gonna very carefully get rid of the mess. Your royal icing flood isn't gonna stick well if we're doing it on top of sprinkles, but I don't wanna break my outline, which is still a little bit soft. And then the bodice, I'm going to do all in our dark gold. So it's just gonna be a single color. And since this is all a different color than the outline, I just wanna make sure that most of my outline is covered up. And then I'm just gonna go over this with the dark gold. And I do think I want a little bit of gold dust in there. This is also from Bakery Bling. And it'll kind of fill in any of those gaps between the bigger sprinkles, and it adds a nice kind of fabric texture effect. And then we're going to fill in the turtleneck with the same dark gold. And that one's kind of easy to overflow, so again, be careful that you're not completely getting a waterfall down the side. And since we did the fondant neck, this has a bit of height to it, and it'll actually look like a bit of a rolled neck. And now I'm gonna go over with a couple pumps of the diamond dust from Sugar Art, while this is still a little bit tacky. So I'm using a combo of white and gold. And I do have a little bit of overflow here on the turtleneck. I don't quite like how it's looking, so while the royal icing's still soft, I'm just gonna kind of push this back into place. And then I'm gonna let this dry for a bit so I can clean off the skirt before we get started on that. So for this skirt, we're gonna be very, very conscious of working, especially with this panel, which could potentially overflow huge water flow onto our sleeve and on the edge of our cookie. We want to work somewhat quickly because we're gonna be doing some different techniques to get the flood into all the crevices. So I'm just going to do kind of a zigzag as high as I want the white to go. And then I'm gonna add a bit here. And this is why we want the 5-second icing, because we really want it to be able to get in crevices. And then we're gonna go with our light gold. Again, being careful on this edge. And since we're going for an ombre effect, you can see that you could be a little bit messy with how the icing goes down. You just don't want that waterfall going off the edge of your cookie. And I want a little bit more white. And I might have a little overflow, but we'll deal with that. And begin pushing royal icing so it's right to the edge, but not overflowing. Again, this is our difficult edge. We want to be mindful of that. And since we're going for the ombre effect, it doesn't matter if we kind of start mixing the colors. And just make sure it's everywhere you want it to be. And we want the dips to show. So at this point, if you find out you have too much royal icing, go ahead and just scoop and take out the excess. We want to show all that work we put into the panels. And do kind of look all the way around, make sure that everything is coated so that we can get sprinkles sticking to this whole skirt without covering up all the dips. And I think that's pretty good. So starting like you did on the sleeves, we're gonna work our way from light to dark and just coat the hell out of it. On the skirt, I think extra sprinkles work because you ensure that you have good coverage. We'll shake it all off at the end for a big reveal. And you might need to carefully tip your cookie to get the sides, or you can go with your spoon and just make sure that it's on your edges. And since I do have the bodice as a solid gold, I'm not going to do quite as much solid gold on the skirt, but I really want this to have an ombre effect top to bottom. So this is our gold dust to kind of fill in the gaps. And I'm going to use some pearl dust on the bottom portion to fill in those gaps. So this edge isn't quite covered, so I'm going to carefully lift my cookie to the side. If you use this cutter design, make sure you lift from the shoulders. I have squeezed too hard on the arms and snapped them off, which is really sad if that happens at this point. All right, now we have a beautiful mess of sprinkles, and I'm gonna go over one more time with my diamond dust. So I did white on the bottom, get some gold diamond dust. And we're gonna let this sit for a couple of minutes so the icing sets. So now I'm going to shake off all the excess glitter. I let this sit for a bit. I just love this part. We're gonna make a mess, guys. And look how pretty that looks. We can even go through the little paintbrush and make sure all the excess is off. This is where you can kind of fine tune and clean. We got our glitter dress.